Hello and welcome to another edition of our online sessions. So this is session number 2, customer discovery. Where do you find them? What do they look like? What are they going to tell you? What's the point? That is why we are here today. Whether you made the session a couple of weeks ago or not, this is your opportunity to kind of dive into a little bit more detail, refresh your memory, and really get ready to understand your customer. So with that, today's goals are very much around focusing on that deep customer discovery and understanding. What information can we gain from them? How's it going to shape what we do when building our business? And then really going through that customer development process. What does it look like? What kind of tools, what kind of hypotheses and things do we need to create in order to actually do this really well for maximum learning? And then last up, we're going to talk through kind of building that customer persona and getting you ready with some research plans. So lots to get through, and with that, away we go. So let's start with a couple of little questions. I'm going to head over to Miro to show you what we did in our session. That first question is really, what is it that experts are actually looking to understand about your business? In other words, if you sit down with an investor, a potential co-founder, someone who can help build your team, or maybe a customer, like, what do they actually want to understand? Well, we put some options up on the board. What is your idea? How big is your market? What problem are you solving? Who's in your team? How much money are you making? How much have you raised? Have you met the mayor yet? All really common questions. But in all of our sessions, you all did a brilliant job, and you all figured out that first question people are going to ask is, what problem are you solving? People want to understand why you're doing this. Like, why do you care? What is the problem you are solving? But then after that, what do they follow up with? It's who have you spoken to about the problem? Again, it's so easy to assume people want you to talk all day long about your idea, but there are 1,000,001 good ideas out there, and there are 1,000,001 bad ideas out there. It's really hard to tell the difference between them all. So when you understand that someone really knows the problem inside out, and then they know their customer, that's when people get really excited by an early stage business. So that first important question, what problem are you solving? And that's why that was session number 1. And then number 2, who have you spoken to about this problem? Who have you validated the problem with? How much of a problem actually is it? That's the stuff we're going to go to town on today. So then we asked you all as a group, like, why is speaking to your customer so important? And this is some of the amazing stuff that we said, and this Miro board is from session 3, I think. So to understand there is room for your product, to understand their needs, what they're looking for, develop your idea, to have a consumer-centric product, it fits market needs, to get feedback, to understand the problem, to build relationships, adapt your business to your actual customer, correct solution to their problem, user empathy, great stuff, to understand how they would like to communicate with you and receive information, to collect reliable data, to establish needs, to get that research, market statistics, better understanding of the problem. Absolutely. So amazing feedback here. So it's clear that you all get the reasoning behind why we talk to customers. And yet, so many people don't do it. I myself am one of them. I have made this mistake over the years, and I will share a journey with you, YouTube exclusive. When I was building my first business, it was an events business, it was a pop-up space, and it was quite cool. It had a lot of awesome kind of benefits and features that the customers can engage with. But we had one huge problem in the business that we never really saw coming. Now the problem was it was a pop-up, right? So we would take it out and we would appear places. We'd get really good feedback, people would really enjoy it, but we were never making enough money. And the reason for not making enough money was our costs were too high for what we were bringing in. And the reason for that was because customers weren't coming regularly enough, and we didn't understand remotely how people were actually going to engage with the business. And therefore we would be out lots, but we'd only maybe have one really busy period out of 3. So that one would make all the money, which would keep the business going, and the other 2 would then lose. Now, it took us ages to figure out why that was and what was going on, and then readjust our plans. If we had done our proper customer research whilst we were actually building the business, obviously being at the time a very young 20-something-year-old, we were so excited in actually creating the space, creating the business, and we didn't have access to this kind of training. We didn't know what we were doing. Had we done that, we would have understood customer behaviors, habits. We could have asked questions like, if we were to deliver this kind of business, how often would you like to engage with it, right? Would you like to then, once you come and engage with our business, would you like to be there for 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, etc.? We had no understanding of how people would genuinely react with us. And that was very difficult to then get those learnings and adapt the business when the business is already running, versus you plan it all out at the start. So that was a hard lesson I learned in my early 20s, and it really put a big roadblock on profitability in the business for some time. So cannot emphasize this enough. The more you can do your customer development now while you're still iterating, you're still thinking about what exactly it is you're building and how you're building it, the better placed you will be to really succeed with your customers. It is daunting getting out of the room and speaking to people, and we're going to talk about that later. But don't let my mistakes be your mistakes. So coming back to the slides, without customer understanding, you won't be able to solve their problem. They won't use your product, and if they're not using your product, then odds are they're not going to pay for it either. It doesn't matter how good, how innovative, how beautiful it is, it really might well fail. So that's why you get out and about and do this. We always like to talk about running a business from the perspective of not just people who've got a business degree. I've got a philosophy degree. I came into this world because I just really enjoy being in social entrepreneurship and creating impact. And in my career, I've tried to find that intersection between real profitability and scale and really massive impact. Some people who are naturally quite good at doing this kind of feedback. We've got anthropologists, product designers, architects, kind of user experience, interface designers, marketeers, science fiction writers, right? People who like to get into other people's heads and understand what's going on, why, and what can we do about it. So if you're one of those categories, great, it gives you a little advantage. And if you're not, then that just means great. You know that you might not have done this before, and we've got to learn how. So with that, let's understand some bad examples if you don't do your customer research. So up on screen, you'll all recognize this, a lovely handle on a door that also says push. We have all, in our brains, completely failed on these doors, often in an embarrassing way. And it is because people just haven't thought to bother to ask, where are you putting this particular product, right? Is it a push, is it a pull? And then combining the two words together. It's nuts, but it happens. It's so easy to do. The next design is one of the best examples of user experience versus design. As a designer, I like, squares or circles or whatever it is, and I create all this stuff, and I create what I think are good flows for users. And then the user starts using your product or your service, and they do what they want to do. Right? User experience is understanding that by talking to your customers, by getting that constant iterative feedback early on. You can start planning the paths that your customer wants to take rather than what you want them to take. And again, that customer development point is really all about, getting out of your head and what you think you need to do and actually doing what your customer needs to do. So always just keep checking yourself. Like when you're creating stuff, like, is this what I want or is this what customers want? And if you're not sure in the team, challenge your team members. Prove it. Tell me this. How do you know this is what the customer wants? And then they can go off and go get 10, 20, 50, 100 pieces of customer feedback, or they've already done it. Great. But what stops us doing this, right? Well, you can always, now's a good time to pause me and jot down a few things, like what has stopped you doing customer development in the past, or what's scary about it. Feel free to pause and have a little go. And if you're just going to crack on with the session, well, I'll give you a few. Number one, it's scary and it's uncomfortable. I've been doing this for well over a decade now. I still get nervous when I speak to people, right? Like, I don't want to embarrass myself. I don't want to waste their time. If you are a vaguely caring human being, you will naturally be self-conscious about this stuff, right? So when everyone's on that page, it actually makes it a little bit easier to kind of acknowledge and then move forwards with it. Also, scary and uncomfortable things get less scary and a bit more comfortable the more you do them. So whilst there might always be a little fear factor, you will feel much more confident doing it. Next up, we believe our assumptions are right. Big reason people don't do customer development is because they are afraid of being proven wrong. And that is one of the absolute killers on a business. You cannot live in that mindset. We obsess about our vision, and sometimes if we've got a really big vision for like an all-encompassing, industry-changing, world-saving business, it can be quite difficult to translate that into vision. And then we worry about not doing ourselves justice, then we just don't do it at all. And that really is a shame. Luckily, you don't need to talk about your vision in customer development. We'll come back to that. It's easy to stay seated behind a screen and just kind of work on stuff and just keep going, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean it's progress. You have to be speaking to your customers. One of my favorite quotes from Sam Altman, who is the CEO of Y Combinator, the most successful accelerator in the world. He says continually, we see the number one characteristic, the number one thing that the most successful startups do over and over and over again, and that they all have in common, is that they all have the shortest customer feedback loops, right? So what that means is they are always talking to their customers about new features, new benefits, how they're changing. Anytime anything is released or updated, it's what do you think? How has this improved experience? Has it made experience worse? Etc., etc., etc. The more you learn from your customers, the better place you will be to succeed. It's as simple as that. So let's move to a little example. See the Signs is a really cool cancer detection, like early warning signs app. Medics as well, not necessarily people who've got a big background in business, medics and scientists and people who are passionate about saving lives. Really cool business, but they had no idea who they were selling to. And for many of you who are thinking you're going to build a medical business, you might be thinking, oh my God, well, yeah, I can't make profit off this. The NHS might use it or whatever it might be. You don't know that. How these guys figured it out was customer development. I'm sure that will come as a surprise. Customer development, going out and speaking to people and understanding what was going on, who would be engaging with the app, who the users were, but who the actual paying customers would be. And in this case, the concern was that if you're at home using their app, it could lead to misdiagnoses or inaccurate cancer signs, which would be terrifying and horrible for people to receive. So they realized, well, what we really need to do is bridge that relationship with GPs. And now, having done oodles of customer development, they're now in, I think, 3,000 plus GPs across the country and are scaling out their business and have a business model that actually makes sense because they can save the NHS a huge amount of money on cancer treatments by detecting the early warning signs and ultimately save lives. So sometimes it does take experimentation to figure out what your business model looks like. But fundamentally, speak to your customers. And if you know that there is a problem there and it needs solving, then keep going and you will figure it out. So next up, Steve Blank. He is considered pretty much the godfather of customer development. I really encourage you to read his book, or at least some of the Medium articles or Wikipedia articles kind of about him and his journey and what he preaches. But first and foremost, his kind of core thesis really is customer development is about getting out of the building. I know that's difficult right now when we're all under lockdown, but the emphasis is still the same. Get out from behind your desk, start speaking to people, whether it's on the phone, whether it's on Google Forms or anything like that, SurveyMonkey. You've got to get out and you've got to get information from people so that you have more information coming in to you when you're designing your business. So really it means a hypothesis-driven approach, and that's what we're going to start building shortly. Understand who your customers are, what problems and needs they have, how are they behaving, what are their habits, what do they currently do and do not do, what are their fears, concerns, joys, things that make them happy, and then what solutions will they give you money for. Too many people get stuck building the business that they want, not the business that all their customers want. This is how you justify what you are doing. In terms of his wider product cycle, he's kind of got these 4 stages. Number 1, customer discovery, where we are today, where it all begins, understanding that problem and solution fit and balance, kind of concepting out what your proposed MVP looks like, and your funnels, where are you going to sell it and how are you going to do it. Then we get to that validation point. That's really when you have a product that you can put in front of customers and they will start paying for it, and you validate whether or not you have product market fit. Product market fit, by the way, is the complicated business term for your product fits the market. It's as simple as that, really. the best way I've ever heard it described, if you know if you have product market fit, is if you don't know, you categorically do not have it. And generally, you know you have product market fit because you're getting inbound leads. So you're not just selling to friends and family at this point, you're selling to people whose names you don't recognize and you've never heard of. And they're coming to your website via anything from social media through to presentations and webinars and seminars that you do, or referrals from people that you've long since forgotten about. And then again, in that column as well, we've also got really refining your business model, your sales and marketing roadmap. And by the way, don't forget the business model workshop is this week, come along. And then you kind of get into really hard execution, sales mode, growth, and then that company building in terms of the whole organizational structure and sales operations. These are things that you can figure out much later down the line. And notice we've got a little pivot at the bottom here. This is very common, startups do it all the time. It's nothing to worry about. It just shows that you are listening to your customers. If you cannot validate your product, then what's happened? It might well be you had a completely accurate understanding of the problem. Your solution just isn't quite right. So what do you need to change? What other benefits or features can you create? And how do you pivot to better solve that problem? Or in other cases, it's actually you've got an amazing product and it solves a completely different problem that you misunderstood. So now you're just pivoting your customer, but the product stays the same. But again, you're only going to figure that out with really good customer development. Customer development is really what we would describe as your unfair advantage. Early on, when you haven't got much of a business yet, and people say, well, why are you going to succeed? What's right? What gives you the edge? This is it. This is your unfair advantage. This is why you shouldn't worry about people copying your idea, because they will not have the same knowledge and information that you have. So let's go into the 5 steps then of how you actually create and build this incredible bank of knowledge of customer development. So 5 steps. Number 1, you form a hypothesis, and we'll do several of those. Number 2, you find people to talk to share the hypotheses with. 3, you ask the right kind of questions to validate that hypothesis or invalidate it. 4, you kind of analyze and make sense of those answers. And then 5, you actually establish very, very clearly what is it that you need to build. Specific features to achieve specific benefits so the customer will want to buy it. And really, when you're looking to build your MVP, you're really just looking to kind of nail that first kind of core benefit, that kind of value proposition. And again, that's what we're really going to talk about in the next session. Okay, up on this slide, we've really just got the link back to the Mayor's website that will show you what it is that the challenge areas are, so that if you're still building your business, you can make sure that it fits into those. If you're looking to apply, equally, if your business goes in a different direction, don't panic. You might not be able to apply for this award, but at the very least, you can really learn and engage with these workshops. What we're going to do for the rest of this session is we're going to use an example of a lady called Joan in AI and aging. So I'm going to walk you through the process of how you build hypotheses and then go through those 5 steps with Joan, with a business of specifically working with people who are elderly, they're aging, and what the problems they face are, and how we can use technology to help them. So, number 1, form that hypothesis. So what is a hypothesis? It's an educated assumption about what's going to happen. As an example, if Joan had a piece of technology that connected her in with her family beautifully, easily, seamlessly, then she would feel really connected to her family. That is a hypothesis. An if statement is a good starting point. Other hypotheses would be Joan is in fact lonely in her care home, or other elderly people who live alone suffer from isolation and real feelings of loneliness, amplified by corona. Start with a goal of about 3 to 5 hypotheses. That can grow, that's fine. They'll also evolve and maybe get more refined over time. Absolutely fine. Everything we do here, as you should well know by now, is an iterative process. That's step-by-step, constant growth, adaptation, steps forward, bang, 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 rather than, we just go from 0 to 1 in one step. It's a million little steps along the way. That's that iterative process. So to help you understand what kind of hypotheses you need, who wants your idea to exist, who's your audience, what problems do they have, how big are these problems, why would they use your product or service, and how much are they willing to pay for it. So some other hypotheses we have on the next page as an example: elderly people in care homes lack regular connection with friends, family, volunteers outside of the care home. So that can be validated as true or false. And then this causes loneliness, true or false, great. And if you invalidate it, if this is not true, then that's not that in itself is a good learning, right? If you invalidate your hypotheses, then it means you can become more focused on fewer of them, or it means you're barking up a tree, right? The example I used in one of the sessions was, if you're going to make little fancy luxury shoes for cats, right? If every single person I speak to who owns cats says, yeah, cats don't need to wear shoes, that's really silly, why would you do that? That's a good invalidation, because I'm not going to spend the next 3 years of my life building cat shoes. So that's a good thing. It is scary though, because if you're really invested in your idea and you really want to build cat shoes, it's not a positive, it's a difficult learning, right? But it's still a positive one. So number 2, they have some access to technology, right? If they have absolutely no technology, then it's going to be very difficult for you to build a technology-based solution. So again, that needs justifying. Number 3, they are not comfortable using tech independently. Number 4, currently they use video, phone calls, or Zoom. 5, the best way to schedule it is with their carer. That's a great one, because that's the practicality of how do you actually get this stuff done? How are they going to behave using your platform? And 6, care homes have a monthly budget of £100 per resident for entertainment. Let's justify that. Is that true? Is that false? Is that totally made up? Because you will get information from people you speak to about when you talk about your business, and sometimes it might be great, sometimes it might not be. But this is a great starting point. And again, we haven't even said what we're going to build yet. If I just want to work with elderly people suffering from loneliness, this is the perfect start. And if I already have an idea, then great. This can then validate what it is I want to build. Okay, so I've switched over to Miro, which you can now see on the screen. And we're going to go down here and you're going to see our Hypotheses Framework. So this is a document that you can just download directly from Google Drive, click on the link, or direct from Miro, you just hit the download button. This is a starting point to make it really, really easy for you. So I would put this on pause, have a go at doing your first hypotheses, and then come back and we'll keep the session going. So let's start 1 to 3, 3 to 5, as many as you can do just to begin with, that are really, really clear. Put it in the description, and then we'll come back and talk about how you might test this. Next up is how do we find and recruit customers to talk to. Using this example, I would like to speak, we need to figure out AI, aging, and people in this space. So who might you speak to? Well, obviously it's Joan, that lady sitting inside a care home, but it's also care home workers. Let's focus in on London because that's where we're based, and it's linked to the competition. And yes, whilst your solution may well work across the UK, whilst it may well work in every single care home in the entire world, which would be awesome, you have to start somewhere. And the more specific you are, the better. As soon as people start pitching early ideas, going, oh, we're going to work in every this, that, or the other, people tune out. People aren't interested in the every way you could work. People are interested in your first 10 customers. Where are you actually going to find them? Where are they going to be? And are they going to prove that you can get product market fit and scale and scale and scale, right? Worry about global domination later. So we also then have the elderly people based inside the care homes, but then we have the families of people in the care homes. And then, we're talking about care homes in particular, but what about elderly people who live alone? Maybe you go, now Mark, now you're telling me to focus less, let's not worry about that, let's come back to that. Fair enough. Equally, if you think that's valuable information now, great, because it might well be that what you're building is better for people who are in their own homes. It might be better for care homes, we don't know that yet. So the more information you're getting in, the better, but don't then try and feel like you have to solve everything for everyone. The more focused and niche you are, the better. It's better to have that perfect foundation and then build your giant mansion on top. So then that next question is, where might you recruit the interviewees? And this is what gets us into kind of what we call watering holes, right? So that's where do people hang out? For our example of Joan, that's relatively easy. You know, they're all in care homes if you're looking for people in care homes. So then it becomes a question of how do you get in front of them? Well, is it messaging care home managers? Can you call up and speak to someone on reception and you can, you know, tell them you're a student and you're looking to learn and discover. And that's really why this session is called Discovering Your Customer Discovery, right? It is a process of learning and you don't always know where the answers are going to come from. And you start with a few ideas and you branch out from there. And then, so in this document, we then also have kind of our key questions to ask, and as well as the watering holes and the description. So this gives you that kind of first step to kind of start planning this out and figure out what's going on. So download this document and please start kind of filling it in, and you know, you're very welcome to bring this to some of the feedback sessions or post it in Miro and ask for feedback. So then in terms of how you recruit them, first thing, you really want to define that recruitment criteria, right? Like, do try and speak to the right people, as I was just saying. Keep it as focused as possible, and then start going a little broader. Start with your friends and family, always a good place. People will always open doors, always ask, you know, do you know a person who might, you know, do X, Y, or Z relating to what you're talking about. Ask lecturers, alumni, you know, this is a peer-to-peer program as well. Ask each other, you know, odds are a lot of us will have grandparents or elderly parents who might well be able to help out. You know, emailing, social media, meetups is great. We've had loads of people talking about going to meetups, especially now under Corona. Like, just get in front of groups of people, learn from each other, and be open. Like, if you're authentic, people will always buy into the fact that you're just trying to create something awesome. And that applies doubly so when you talk about solving people's problems, rather than, oh, I have this idea, I want to do this, I want to build this, I want to do that. Like, hopefully you see the difference between how one sounds like you're a little bit arrogant and you think you're God's gift, and the other one sounds like you're genuinely trying to solve people's problems. So it is game changing. And then we get to some useful tools. Scrap.io is a good one for finding leads and emails. Calendly then means you can just book straight into people's, or people can book straight into your diary. So it just makes that scheduling process as easy as possible. And then next up, we've got a really good example of an email to write. So I'm going to read this off the screen so it's really super clear. If we're going to email a care home, let's say we've got Julie, who's a care home manager at, you know, Care Homes London. Dear Julie, I hope you're well in these challenging times. We're going to make it really personal. Since my grandmother spent 10 years of her life isolated in a care home, it really keeps me up at night thinking about loneliness and elderly people for London. You know, what matters to me are experiences with people like you, professionals working in elderly care, you know, the experts, and how we can support you to make their lives easier. My goal is to have a conversation with 50 care professionals to understand the challenges faced by yourselves and what support you need. If you're willing to spare 15 minutes of your time, it would mean a lot to me. Plus, I'm just really happy to help with any issues you're currently facing. If you are interested, please book a time via this link. I hope we can tackle loneliness together. So, learnings here. 1, super personal and relatable. 2, like, how much this matters to me. Like, I care about loneliness. It's an issue that's affected me, my family. I'm super passionate. I'm here to make your life better. This isn't about me building my business and being awesome. This is about you being better at what you do with cool stuff I can help you with. The more focus it is on them, the absolute better. And one of your goals through this is to give people as little or as few reasons to say no to you as possible. As soon as you go in and say, I'm going to build this technological solution that solves, people are going to go, oh, well, you know, old people really struggle with technology. Like, we've done this stuff before. We had another company in, it didn't go well. It was really stressful. You know, they charge lots of money. 1,000,001 reasons for you to say no to you, even though, you know, you might not be charging anything yet. You might not be doing a tech solution at this point, but you've already got the no. So you have to make sure that people can read this who are busy, who are stressed. They don't have to help you. So you need to ensure they want to help you. And this is already like the longest I would ever make an email like this. The shorter, the better. Just assume everyone is really busy. No one has time to help you. And then the last thing to say on this email is the subject. Now, the trick to subjects, short, snappy, tell people what you need from them. The more direct, the better. You can also do some research onto this. Some things that work really well, bizarrely, I don't understand the science, but using no capitals is sometimes considered really effective. Just saying quick question, ... People are quite intrigued by that and open it. You can also Abn Test stuff. I encourage that for basically everything. An Abn Test is just where you change one element in something that you're doing and then test, measure which one's more successful. So maybe you try one with this title and then you do another one that's just quick question, all lowercase, ... and then see which one has a higher open rate or more click-throughs to your Calendly. Simple, simple, simple. And now moving to step 3, we're getting onto how do you actually ask the right questions. Well, this comes back to understanding what your hypotheses are and actually validating them. Everything you know is wrong, or at least that's a good starting point. We are subject to cognitive bias, which we all need to accept to understand that everything that we think is influenced on some level by other stuff. So the more you can get out and justify how your actual customer feels, the better. Otherwise, you could get trapped in this world where you think you know what the customer wants and you think you have a good idea, but you don't really know. So confirmation bias is our innate tendency to pay more attention to information that actually confirms our beliefs. So you will rate it higher than people who say, oh, I wouldn't, I don't think Joan would be able to utilize this technology, or whatever it might be. It is a huge bears a huge responsibility for product failure. And we are more likely to ignore or downplay facts that contradict our beliefs or interpret subjective information in a way that favors what we actually want to believe. An amazing example of this is in 2007, Apple launched the first ever iPhone. Now every single phone on the market, and this is Android, looks a lot like an iPhone as it did back in 2007. If you Google what Nokia was creating in 2007, you'll think they were on a different planet. Now they did everything by the book. They did their customer research. They were using kind of agile methodology to create a new product and develop. But the problem is they were asking all the wrong questions and they had so much confirmation bias. They all thought that what they needed was a better camera, a nicer screen, a better touchpad and so forth. And when you ask your audience, would you like a better touchpad? Would you like a better screen? Would you like a better camera? They're all going to say, yeah, that sounds great. Of course I'd like a better version of this. I don't want a worse version of this, do I? Apple weren't asking these questions. Apple were talking to customers saying, what would you like in a phone? How do you think you should behave? Like, how do you interact with your phone? What do you actually do with it? Well, people really want to just be able to access the internet. People want to be able to listen to their music, and people want to engage in a phone in a fun way that's going to shape their life, rather than like the BlackBerry and that kind of style of phone was entirely about work. The iPhone is about your life, and then subsequently work. So Apple go off and create the iPhone, and Nokia created just a bigger, slightly nicer version of everything they had previously. These products are barely even in the same environment or world. They look so different. Needless to say, one crashed and burned, and the entire business has struggled ever since, and the other one has propelled Apple into the stratosphere and beyond. So, cannot stress the importance of asking the right questions. How do you do that? The MEP Test is one of the best books out there you can read on this. The idea kind of comes from passing the MEP Test, right? Which is if you were to go to your mum and say, hey mum, how you doing? I've got a business idea, and you explain it, and really your mum's always going to say yes, because she's going to encourage you. She's going to say, hey, this is great, yes, I'll pay whatever you want for it. This is not good customer feedback, right? Because you're leading them and you're getting total confirmation bias on the things you already like. So how do you actually pass the MEP Test, right? No pitching, be specific. You have to listen. You have to use examples, not generic stuff. Dig deeper, understand behaviors. Don't lead people into answers. Don't make assumptions and don't lie to yourself. When you get compliments and you get feedback, you got to take everything with a pinch of salt, if not a whole lot more. So let's use the example with a cookbook, right? If I were to say, hey mum, I'm going to build a cookbook app. Would you like that, mum? Yes, Mark, that sounds great. Would you be willing to pay £5 a month for this? Yes, Mark, of course I would. I'd love to pay £5 for an app that you design. Like, great, lovely, I've got wonderful mum. What kind of stuff would you like on it? Oh, put recipes, put this, put whatever you think is good on there. I support you, I encourage you. Awful feedback. By contrast, if I go, hey mum, how often do you spend cooking each week, right? And I get a time frame. Like, how do you find the cooking process? Like, do you love it? Are you okay with it? Or do you actually, do you struggle with it? Right? Getting some options. I'm understanding how she feels about it. What kind of behaviors do you have? What kind of meals do you make? Like quick meals, short meals, long meals? What kind of ingredients are you using? Fresh or like just standard, easy to use stuff, etc., right? Where do you currently go to get recipes? What do you struggle with during the cooking process? What do you enjoy? What do you not enjoy? How long do you spend researching recipes versus actually cooking, right? Have you ever tried watching videos before? Do you read cookbooks? What kind of cookbooks do you read? You see how this is a whole different ballgame to our first approach. This is leading me down the path of really interesting, valuable points of feedback. When you understand people's habits and behaviors, their problems, their fears, concerns, their passions, their joys, then you can start shaping what it is that you're going to build and how it's going to get to a position where people want to pay for it. So, going back to our kind of AI and aging example, some good questions. How much do you usually spend on your resident social activities each month? How do you usually deal with loneliness in your care home? What are the biggest issues you face around loneliness in your care home? How would you rank this problem from 1 to 10 in terms of severity? What solutions have you already tried? What went well? What didn't go well? Can you tell me a specific example about one of your residents who is suffering from loneliness right now? The more detail you have and the more specific information, the better, because this is what's going to frame what it is that you actually build. So what do these good outcomes look like? You are validating or indeed invalidating your assumptions, your hypotheses, right, about what customers want, right? So if one of your hypotheses is Joan or elderly people will be able to adopt any technology easily because they're desperate to speak to their children, and then, only 1 out of 10 elderly people say they feel they would be able to break through technology barriers to communicate, you have a problem. You have invalidated that hypothesis. You cannot go away and build crazy complicated technology. That might sound like an obvious example in this case, but it's one that is often forgotten. Like ease of use, how important is that to your customer? If it is the #1 defining benefit, then every other benefit you create is totally useless if you miss ease of use. If all your assumptions were correct, every single one of them absolutely perfect, I'm not sure you were asking the right questions, or maybe you weren't listening enough. So go back over your results, see what you learn, and maybe refine and adapt the survey. This is why I'm a big fan of go get feedback from 5 people, or even just start with 1. Get feedback from 1 other person on this program, like what do they think of the survey, and then mold it, adapt it so it grows. And then I might do 5 people, 10 people, 20 people, 50 people, 200 people, and so forth. And then go through this, repeat this process, test new assumptions. When you then build your first MVP, you'll then want to actually get them to play with it and give you more feedback. So you'll have a new survey, like always learning. This is that feedback loop. The more often you are doing this, the shorter it is, the more frequently you're talking to your customers, the better. Do not panic about overloading people with information. If you are genuinely solving a problem for them, they will then become invested in your success because they want your product. They need your product. And if you haven't shown them you're solving that product, then yes, they will find you bothersome and that you email them too much or call them too much. That is a good lesson and a learning. So a good point here would be potentially pause me and start drafting out a couple of questions so you can get an idea of this. Go back to your hypotheses. Again, in that document on Miro, we've got the key slides. You can work through them all and just type out a few examples. And again, this is an iterative process. You'll find if you can't ask good questions that answer your hypothesis, then maybe actually your hypothesis wasn't phrased correctly. So you go back and you iterate and you change it, and then we make even better questions, and so forth. So don't panic, this is a total learning process. And then we head to number 4, making sense of the answers. You've got your customer development, you've done some research, what does it all mean? Well, this is where we start creating user personas, and we've got our example up here on the slides. Take all of that information and create someone specific. So this is why I keep referring to Joan, right? Joan is our elderly care home resident, and we're gonna fill out the user persona for her. So here she is. Joan, 86, lives in a retirement home in Surrey, 30 miles away from family, profession, retired nurse, salary, £140 with pension, and then let's go through all of these documents. Watering holes, where does she hang out? Well, this case, clearly she hangs out in her nursing home, and because of lockdown, not much else. But I would also do all of this stuff in relation to lockdown at the moment, what's going on, but also as and when we're coming out of this, where are people going to be hanging out? How are you going to find them? How might you approach people if it's on the street and in a way that is in, with a mask and you're encouraging people to actually talk to you positively. So, we've got question marks here. Does she hang out on social media events, publications? Probably not on social media, but the events, she'll go to care home events. Publications, what is she currently reading? Like, can you speak to the care home and see if you can get a flyer sent out to her or distributed around the care home? Simple stuff. Always asking and looking for more stuff. You don't have to do everything, but the more options you have, the better you can decide what it is you need to do. What are her goals? Easy to use way of keeping in touch with family. She wants to learn, in this case, we've got one user persona where she wants to learn new technology because she really, really wants to reduce her sense of loneliness. You might then have another user persona that is then the opposite of Joan, like someone who's totally disengaged from tech, doesn't want to utilize tech. So how do you overcome those barriers for them? Generally, again, you want to start with maybe 3 user personas as a good starting point. You could do Joan, start with the easy adopters, start with Joan, start with the care home user, the resident, maybe it's a family member, or maybe it's someone else just like Joan. What are her motivations? Hearing her family news, reducing her sense of loneliness, like feeling connected, sharing her tech skills with her friends. She'd like to be able to help them as well. She'd like to feel valuable, right? She enjoys knitting, board games, friends, seeing family, right? Why are those things important? Well, it might well be you build board games into the business that you're building so that these things fit together. Frustrations. She hates asking for help. Tech can be daunting, but she still wants to get over it. Maybe she's in the early stages of dementia. What does that mean? Well, short-term memory is going to be difficult. How can she write things down? How can it be really easy to use? And in this case, not confident using an iPad as it shakes as a handshake. These then become barriers that we can figure out how to overcome. How does she solve the problem now, right? What is the current competition? Well, it's a battered old Nokia. It's really hard for her to read the screen, thumb pad, whatever. Recently given an iPad, doesn't know how to use it, begun using Skype a little bit, difficult, uses Facebook a couple of times a week, that kind of thing. And I like quotes because they bring it to life, right? I wish I had an easy to use way of calling my family over video phone at a time that suited them. Really clear to understand what she wants. The more complex, the more clear your persona is, the more targeted you can be. So definitely do a couple of these, put a name on them, bring this person to life, make it your absolute goal to deliver maximum value to Joan's life and solve her biggest problem in the best possible way. And when you can do that for Joan, you'll find that you start doing it for lots and lots of other people in her exact kind of peer group. So as a task for today, let's write down, you've got this document in front of you, start drafting a bit of this stuff out, or save it for another day when you've actually done some customer research. At the same time though, you can still start figuring some of this stuff out now. Like, aim for your ideal customer. Like, that there is a Joan out there for you no matter what it is you're creating. What can you maybe make assumptions on? Maybe this then influences your hypotheses and then the questions you're asking. Again, this is an interconnected process and always iterating. And then when you've done a first go, share it. Share your user persona, get feedback. People don't need to be in your industry or in your space to be able to look at it and be like, wow, this is great. This is so much detail. This is really valuable. And for them to ask good questions. What about this? What about that? And so forth. Because remember, it's all about feedback loops. The shorter they are, the more you're learning, the better place you're going to be to succeed. And with that really has been our session. On the Miro board, you'll also find a customer empathy map with some examples on. That's a more complex version of understanding wants and needs and really empathizing clearly with your customer. It's kind of an advanced activity, but it's one I love. Feel free to experiment with that and always, get in touch, ping me if you've got questions. Please bring user personas to some of the feedback sessions if you want to go through them. Do bring surveys and we can give you some feedback, but do definitely book in via the link on Miro or indeed in the PDF of this, which is on Miro as well. and come and see myself and the team and get some really, really good feedback. So that's it, that's our session. It's been a blast taking you through this process of customer development, understanding, you know, why ideas often fail because people just don't do that research, understanding that this is your unfair advantage, this is how you stand out, how people can learn that you really are the person to take, you know, this concept forwards and really solve people's problems. Because if you're not solving problems, building a business is really just kind of like a vanity project, and a vanity project that's really hard and not going to succeed. So you need to solve problems, and you need to be assured as much as you can do that you're solving the right ones in the right way. So with that, thank you very much. Please come to this week's sessions. They're all on value proposition and business model. How do we distill all of this learning from customer development? How do we create a value proposition your customer will buy into in a way that is engaging, is compelling, it can be shared with investors, and it will inform your sales process later down the line. And of course, then your business model. How does it all fit together? What's the value of a business model? How does it really help you grow? And how do you do it in a way that's engaging, it's easy, it's as pain-free as it can be, and it will really drive your business forward? That's what we're going to be focused on. So thank you very much. Have a lovely, lovely day, afternoon, morning, wherever you are in the world, and I can't wait to see you all in the next session really, really soon. Bye-bye.